All yours.
All right, I will call the meeting of the Community Center Committee to order on today, February 28th. And the first thing on our agenda is to accept the minutes from, or to talk about the minutes from the last meeting. Does anybody want to propose any changes or anything?
No, nothing. I could give them a look at me.
Right. So we'll accept the minutes from the last meeting. We also wanted to talk about a committee member update. Unfortunately, Tom Sawyer will no longer be with us on the committee. And Jenna Godot is interested, so she's going to take the steps to meet with the select board and put in an application and things like that. So
Once she gets back.
yeah, she does so much fun. So that is the beginning of our meeting. We are going to be meeting with Robert Barcelona from UNH, and we can save some of that for when he does join us. We can jump ahead to number 8, which is clarify the next meeting date, and we'll just get through some of those logistics while he's. So we said, I don't know.
It would be March 28th. It's the same, February and March have the same deadline.
Okay. And how does the 6:30 time work? To go to 6:30?
Yeah, works for me.
Yeah. I'm hoping to not have longer than an hour and 15 minutes. I figured would be outside of what we would need, but we'll see, give or take. Okay, that's great. So do we want to talk about any of the documents that, since we have a few minutes, that Pam sent?
Is Matt Fry one of the people we're waiting for?
Matt
Yes.
Fry is,
There
is the student. Hi, Matt.
He's on mute.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
Good. Thank you for coming.
Oh, my pleasure to be here. Bob will be on in just a second, I'm sure.
Okay. Matt, maybe I'm Pam. We've emailed back and forth, and I just wanted to be sure that you were able to get in and not have any issues. Thank you for being right on your cell phone.
No problem. Yeah, I tried to reboot my computer and it update on me. So there's apparently 6 minutes to go on that. So we're going.
Of course.
Once Bob gets here, we'll do a go around and kind of let everybody get to know you and catch up with you at that point.
That's great.
So, are you guys in session right now, or did you just come back from?
We're in session. We've got spring break coming up in another 2 weeks. So that'll be a nice little break, but we've been going strong. You know, we've been in person all semester, all year. So we've been getting it done.
Now, are you doing teaching assistant for Bob, or what are you?
No, I've been on the faculty with him for 6 or 7 years now.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Do we want to continue to have our meeting right now while we can, or?
Sure.
Don't let me, I'll go on mute.
The only other thing that we were going to talk about is sort of, review the documents that were sent to us to see if there was anything for us to prepare for to talk with these guys. But if everybody's prepared and ready to go, we go with that. I mean, my feeling was, to get a summary of what it is that they would offer us. In what way is the committee going to be needing to participate in any of that? And then in what way will they be a part of the request for proposal? So those were sort of what my thoughts were after reading those kind of, the documents, but I'm sure other things will come up.
Maybe one thing we can do is, I know we talked about the possibility of Jenna becoming, but how and where can we try to circulate the last 2 members of the group? And I was really hoping that Tom might have, could point us to somebody who in the senior or older age group would be interested in serving. And then somebody, I was trying to think of someone who I know that has young children that's coming in on the other end, because I think it's good to have that balance. the four of you kind of have a commonality to a
I
certain
know.
degree, which is good, because that gives us strength to the group.
Done the
Jenna,
same
for sure.
thing, and-
Yeah.
And
I
then somebody
thought-
that I spoke to was Dave Gubriel, but he has a commonality as well, but he has two young kids, and he was a little bit interested for sure. Mostly because he knows that he would like to have one and would utilize it
Mhm,
more than we probably could, as far as our kids are concerned.
mhm.
Well, it's been very interesting to me because my granddaughter lives in Brunswick, and she's involved in a lot of both of my granddaughters are there. And it was very interesting to be over there and see how many of our residents use their services,
Oh,
like,
Lord,
you know,
yeah.
like the 3 to 5 year old basketball program.
Mhm.
That 4 of the 8 people were from Topsham.
Wow.
And parents that I knew, Dave's was one of them, and Andy Maynard, and my granddaughter is Brunswick, but, hi, Bob. But it was very interesting to see that part of it.
Well, and just to add to that, I talked to Lori LaPointe, who might have I mean, she's still in the same neighborhood as us, but she has grandchildren who are young. So I thought, well, tap into that genre of people, and maybe she said she would put it out to a couple people. Whether or not she'll be able to, but she's got the Wiscasset connection too. It would be amazing, but to think of that, even 65-year-old crew that might, it's not that she's
Have a
that old,
membership,
but yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and just bring that perspective for their community, that demographic.
Right.
Yeah, I was surprised to see Tom was leaving.
He has some personal things.
Yeah.
He's on the finance committee as well and had to rescind that. So it was
Yeah.
not because he wanted
More
to.
to it, yeah.
Yeah, you have a neighbor, actually, Carmela, a widower.
Yeah.
Or widowy. How's that go? She'd be an interesting person to consider,
Ask her, yeah,
being alone and,
right, or Charlie.
older,
yeah,
maybe she would be looking for events
right,
for people like her that don't live in Highlands or whatever.
right.
I was at the Brunswick Community Center playing basketball with the kids on whatever, one morning this weekend, and every single person there was from Topsham, all Topsham, every single one. Until we left, there were 2 Brunswick kids coming in.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway,
Let's not hold these
yeah,
guys
for
up.
free, right.
Hi, Bob, welcome. There you go.
You'd think I know how to use Zoom by now.
We
good
said
to-
hello
good to see
to Matt
everybody.
We said hello to Matt already. And you guys are talking with our committee by the owl, so you can kind of see our whole group across the top, and then whoever's speaking to you will pop up, so.
Sure.
Okay. I think what we thought we'd start with is to ask you kind of to do an introduction on, they're familiar with a few of your studies that you've done. We've shared them with them so that they could kind of read through and get a sense of, but mostly if you don't mind kind of giving them a introductory.
Yeah,
As
sure.
as well about yourself.
Sure, absolutely. Well, let's just talk a little bit about who we are, and Matt, you can jump in as well on this. It's good. First of all, it's good to see you, and thanks for the invitation. So I'm Bob Barcelona. I'm the chair of the Department of Recreation Management and Policy at UNH. So I'm sort of responsible for the academic unit here at UNH. We've got an undergraduate and a graduate program. We train the next generation of parks and recreation professionals, really across a pretty wide range of interests and specializations. So that's kind of what we do on the academic side. But one of the things we do as well, sort of as a service to communities, is to assist our communities with parks and recreation planning, management. We sort of serve as a sounding board for communities really across New England. And so a lot of times it's helpful, especially as organizations, agencies, parks and recreation departments are embarking on strategic planning or master planning. Sometimes it's helpful to have an outside voice to help guide that process or help lead that process, work with the organization to, conduct the plan, collect the data, come up with a set of recommendations. and essentially be a partner on those plans. And so we've done a number of these throughout New England, New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts. And they really range in scope. Anything, we've had communities work with us on very specific kinds of scopes where, you know, they may be interested in indoor recreation community centers like you all. We've had departments come to us, communities come to us and say, we want to really look at a recreation needs assessment across the board. So not just indoor facilities, but really take a look at our outdoor facility needs and our programmatic needs. We've had communities work with us on economic impact studies, where we've assessed the economic impact of youth sports tournaments on the local community, and really everything in between. Matt's done some inclusion projects where we've looked at sort of inclusion issues and ADA compliance and things along those lines. And so we just generally work with communities as they ask us. We're not necessarily consultants, although we sort of play that role when asked. We generally are working with communities that have limited budgets. So, you know, they're not necessarily in the market to spend $40,000 or $50,000 on a master plan with a consulting group, but we can maybe fill the gap at a much lower price point, really as a way of just assisting local communities as a part of our mission at UNH. So that's a little about who we are and what we do. And we kind of will work with you as you have interests or needs to put together a scope that makes sense for you based on what you're looking to do. So that's us. Matt, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, but that's a little spiel about who we are and what we do.
Sure. And, you know, Bob hit on the big parts. And again, I'm Matt Fry. I'm a member of the faculty in rec management and policy at UNH. I've worked on many of these projects over the years. And I think one of the most valuable things as an outside agency coming into the process is that we come in without any real agenda today. And it's a nice way to get the sort of unfiltered view of your stakeholders and your tax to really see what they're looking for. You know, the phrase that we use all the time is that we're holding up a mirror to the community and just reporting back what we hear. So, you know, that process of public engagement, of data collection, both through focus groups and a survey, gives us a nice broad ability to get a pretty truthful view of what people want and need in your community. And again, you know, without having to be someone who's paying property tax or living in that community, it's a lot easier for us as outsiders.
So both Matt and I have worked in the field, so we come to this from a practitioner standpoint. So we understand the practice side of this, not just the sort of the wonky data collection side. We understand how this gets put into practice. We have a pretty diverse team at UNH. So Matt and I would be the principal, the people that will be working with you principally on the project, but we do bring in our students. We use this as a learning opportunity for them as well to understand the planning process. So we work with our graduate students and occasionally an undergrad student or two who sort of want to understand the planning process, and they will help. But we don't look at this as a student project. We never sort of see these as student projects. They are our projects. We run them, we manage them, and we use our students to assist. The projects are I don't want to say too big and too important for our students, but we don't want these to be, we want them to be learning experiences, but we're also cognizant of how important they are to you. And so our students are learning, and so they help. We're really the faces of the project. I will say this, Matt is also, well, actually he's just finishing up a term as a select board member. So he brings the elected officials perspective, which is really valuable to have.
A community.
Yes, not Northwood, right?
Northwood. Yep.
So we always like to say it's good to have a representative from the dark side on the projects like this. And so no, I'm just kidding. We love the elected officials. But so we do kind of have that sort of practice-based experience, as well as the looking at elected officials and sort of seeing it through the lens of of that side as well. And I think we're really good at public engagement. You're going to get at the end of the day, you'll get a project that I think will really capture the spirit of the community. And, we've worked in community. You might not want to hear this, but I'll just tell you. I mean, we've worked in communities where at the end of the day, on the other side of the process, we have to report back that we're just not seeing the need, or we're just not seeing the enthusiasm. So there may be a desire or a want, but it may not be a near-term priority. There may be an interest, but there isn't a willingness to pay. And that's happened in communities that we've worked in before. So it's not always that the other end of this is there's a recommendation for a 20,000 square foot indoor community center. Sometimes that comes up and sometimes it doesn't. The last thing I guess I'll say on this, and I'm happy to take questions. We could talk about process and things like that, but is just that, we will work with you as partners on this project. We will rely on you in many ways for contacts, and so people will turn out for public engagement because you're asking them to turn out. They're not going to turn out because two random people from the University of New Hampshire are asking them to turn out. So we will need to rely on you to help us recruit participants, especially for focus groups, things along those lines. Your community far better than we do. We would rely on you as partners really to sort of vet things that we're hearing, because you hear a lot of stuff in these processes. And we're also cognizant to know that everybody kind of comes in with their own needs and wants. And sometimes we want to make sure that what we're hearing is accurate. What we're hearing is true to the spirit of what we're hearing. So, we're not just sort of the consultants that come in from the back end and do the whole thing and drop a report in your lap. We'll be partners with you throughout the process, because we think that's going to be a better project in the end.
And at the end of the day, I was just
Go ahead.
or that's going to be thrown on a shelf and never looked at, right? So I think what we do provide at the end of the project will be actionable recommendations based on the best data that's available to us. There's nothing worse than putting time, effort, and people's blood, sweat, and tears into a report or a plan that just gathers dust. So that's really not what we're after.
I was just going to ask, how would you work with us? Do you want to meet weekly? Do you want to meet twice a month? That kind of a thing, or how do you get information from us? Logistically?
That's a great question. I mean, usually we build in some meetings into the process. So there may be touch base meetings. Maybe it's with your entire committee. Maybe it's with a representative of your committee. So we don't necessarily have to meet with the whole committee every single time. But there might be a few times that we want to do that, right? I think, again, I think just building those touch points into the process. I don't think it has to be weekly by any stretch, but 3 times, 4 times that we're touching base with you throughout the project, just so that we're on the same page throughout the process. And like I said, we also don't want to repeat work that's already been done. So you all may have strategic plans that you've done, or master plans that you've done. You have survey. I don't know. You may have surveys that you've done pointing to need in this particular area. That's information that would be helpful for us to have and to talk through with you about what your perceptions are, if you've done any of that yourselves. So we just really want to understand as much as we can about the context. So usually there'll be a meeting of some sort in the beginning of the process to really understand the context of the community. We would like to come up and do some visits, to do some site visits. In some cases, communities like on the indoor community center side, they may already know where they want to put it. Like they may have land, community might have land set aside. We would want to see that. You might have multiple parcels. We would want to see those. You may not be in even that far along, and that's okay. But I think that there'll be opportunities for us. We build it into the schedule, 3 or 4 meetings, formal meetings, and then availability to sort of shoot emails to people, contact that's needed. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I certainly don't expect that we would be meeting weekly with you. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to give you a little bit of background, I think would be helpful is that the committee's been in existence for 2.5, 3 years. It was the fall of 2019, right before COVID hit. And we did some looks, did some meetings, met at that time, had a few other partners in the table or that had come in to speak to us. I met with the selectmen, found out we weren't headed in the direction they wanted, and then COVID hit. And then it was kind of regrouping and where are we? Last spring, we got together again. We had a workshop with the selectmen, kind of put a new plan of action together, and started finding, and we've gained members and lost members along the way. You're looking at a core of 4 members today, and we're, I think we were set up for 7, am I right? 7 traditional. And we have 4 right now currently, and we're talking about finding 3 more members in the community that come from different backgrounds or different experiences, because there's a lot of commonality around the table to a certain degree right now. So we're thinking about how do we find those other people. Last spring, the committee put together a survey, and we conducted just a simple Google survey. It was not a database or anything such. It was just a collection of information to give back to the selectmen, and I can forward a copy of that to you folks. It was finished in July. I think we finished it up July 15th, I think, or
Well, we
somewhere.
did get 1,000 responses.
And we got 1,000 responses, which were a community of 8,500. Yeah, and last summer, we had the pleasure of having 3 Bowdoin interns that stayed with us for the summer, and one of them actually took all the survey results and meshed it together and did a presentation, which I can also provide to you.
Yeah.
And Justice did a really nice job of analyzing and putting together some graphs and giving us some details. And I think that's what the selectmen were looking for from the committee. So I'll leave it to you guys at that point of, that was presented in August, and here we are.
And the response from the community was favorable, but really we're just moving on to the next step, and we've been given approval from the select board for this next step. So we're excited about that. You had mentioned one thing about parcels of land. Is that something that is part of your assessment? Because we do not currently have a parcel of land. I'm jumping around, but.
Yeah, so one of the things we would want to do as a part of the process is sort of identify potential locations and whether there's parcels available in those areas. I mean, we would probably we typically will talk to your different communities, call them different things, but your town planner to see, because I'm sure they have a sense of what is realistic and what's available and where. But that is one of the things we would talk about is like, where's the best place for this? And in some places, like I said, there's an existing, you may have an idea in mind, and other places you have no idea. In which case that'd be part of our public input process, right? So to really try to understand where people want this located. Is there a location that would be central, that would be accessible? So yes, we may not be able to drill down to the exact parcel that you would be looking at, but we would be able to give you a sense of kind of where this might be. And we may even be able to get to a specific location if I'm thinking that Farmington, we did the Farmington project where, there was a number of different ideas, but at the end of the process, we really narrowed it down to a specific location based on public input and, just going through the process where we thought that would be the best place.
And hearing community members where, all communities have those neighborhoods or sections where, this neighborhood is usually willing to travel to here, and that neighborhood will never go all the way across town, So we don't know the community at this point, but that's part of our learning process too. And really talking to those different stakeholders and community members to figure out, okay, what is a central location that would be adequately utilized by everyone in the community? Central doesn't mean middle of the map. So that we can definitely help with that process. We're not going to be able to give you our plans for a building. We don't do the design pieces and the engineering, but we started down that road.
I have a question. I'm Mary Kate. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So my question is, part of what we've sort of been talking about with the select board is that this is not like a done deal, that we're definitely doing a community center, where this is really like the formative research part, the really exploratory part. So I appreciate you saying that sometimes the outcome is that you don't actually recommend one. My question is that a community center seems like a solution. And I think about a needs assessment, I think of problem definition or assessment. How do you balance the assessment of we have the ability to meet some needs, like we have some fields or we have some existing buildings where we're doing fitness, whatever else, marrying that with this idea of a communal spot. So how do you sort of prioritize a center versus meeting the other recreational needs is my question.
Right. Well, so some of that is based on the scope that you're going to ask us to do. So if you want us to just narrow in on, what is the sort of need or interest in the community, the priority in the community for an indoor community center, and you're going to start with that as your as the end result, then we would focus on that as the question, right? And so we would look as a part of the process at existing indoor space that you're using for recreation, how it's being used. So for example, typical model in New England is the shared use agreements with the schools. And if you're doing that already, I probably don't need to tell you that. Let me guess. When you need the space, it's not available. And when the space is available, you don't need it. Right? Does that?
This isn't your first time, Bob.
No.
Yeah, you just nailed it.
I think we've worked hard, and I think compared to a lot of other communities, we worked hard to have a very good relationship with our elementary schools and our middle and high school. So I think we utilize it to the best that we can. I think COVID's kind of put a cap on some of that this year with what the school's willing to do and have and that type of thing, but it's opening, the doors are opening, and we're hoping things will change.
And we do have a brand new high school. So we have a brand new high school and we have a brand new turf and stadium. So just thinking about people looking at, and those are outdoors, of course, but thinking about, well, we've just put money into these new facilities, but this idea of a communal meeting space, which may or may not be sports oriented, is still there.
Sure. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we'll talk about when we meet with folks is things like, the time horizon for this project, and then being thoughtful about that planning process. I always encourage communities to make sure that they're, putting a new bond on a ballot as old debt is being retired, right? So once that school is paid off, that's your
interesting concept.
start trying to raise funds for a new construction, if that's the direction you're going to go. That way it's a nice level tax burden. Anytime your tax burden is doing this, people get mad. So just being thoughtful about that process and really picking your spots is part of that. Again, and we'll hear that from those stakeholders as well.
And then just going back to your question earlier about balancing priorities, one of the things, every community is a little different. And sometimes, one of the things we hear is we may be able to, you may be able to think creatively about how you meet different community needs with this one project. So for example, Hampton, New Hampshire is a good example of that, where there was some need around library space. And so start thinking about, well, what would the possibilities look like to combine, recreation and library services in one shared facility? Or, York was a good example where there was some conversation about, was there a possibility of combining municipal, like town hall sorts of functions within a community center? I mean, there's all kinds of configurations that communities use to try to meet multiple needs in one space. Older adult programming, so dedicated senior space, those sorts of things. So we're going to hear those needs and start thinking, okay, well, how could you maybe meet several needs potentially within one project? Or it may be that, no, the focus here is really on recreation. So
that goes back to the willingness to pay question too. So if even if people are in agreement that something would be good for the community, it's a good idea, it would help the kids, it would help the seniors, but what we're hearing is that it's just not going to pass, or that it's not the right moment, or there's greater priorities. We'll reflect that in what we're telling you. Like you just said, it's not a done. We don't want to give you a report that says go for it and then not have it go anywhere because the public doesn't have the thirst for it. So, again, we're just going to try to collect that information and bounce it back to you to the best of our ability.
So one of the questions that I had as a follow-up, thank you for that, is how do you manage the message when you're meeting with people? Because obviously, like, we got excitement from people when we surveyed them, and now you would be doing this way more involved process. And so it generates enthusiasm for the community, thinking like, okay, we're really, like, this is a thing, like, this is really happening. How do you temper that excitement while you're doing this?
So can I jump on this one, Bob? Because we might actually. So I actually think rather than temper that excitement, I suggest redirecting that excitement. So either getting people onto your committee, or I think if you have a reason to believe this is going to go forward, or some capital project is going to happen in the next 10 years, I would consider looking at a Friends of Recreation 501c3. Now, you as the department can't make that happen, but anyone else around the table certainly can spearhead that effort to create a 501c3 nonprofit. They would be able to fundraise, write grants. You can apply for Land Water Conservation Fund money, state, federal, local money. There's, who knows what the Alphons are giving away right now, right? So being able to channel that excitement into fundraising diversifies your funding stream. Now, I'm not as familiar with how the revenue piece works in Maine as I am in New Hampshire, but at least here in New Hampshire, if someone just hands the municipality a big check, they can't necessarily earmark that for a specific project. But if the 501c3 were to say, okay, well, we're going to pay this check to the engineers to develop plans, and the municipality doesn't have to do that part because the money got raised through grant writing, regular fund development, that sort of grassroots fundraising efforts. It makes that process a lot easier, and it puts skin in the game. I think people who have made efforts to raise funds or be part of some sort of project are going to be much more likely to support that when it comes time to vote for a bond or support an issue on the ballot.
That's helpful. Thank you so much.
Yes, the 501c3 Friends group can be hugely helpful, and we can talk through that a little bit more with you. Matt's got some experience with standing one of those up in Northwood, and so we can talk a little bit more about what that process looks like. I think the other thing to temper expectations, and we will do this, is just to let people know, like, realistically, we are the tip of the spear in terms of this process. And so even if everything went exactly according to plan, you're really looking at the very, very earliest at a 3-year arc. And that's if everything just fell exactly into place. So, this is not going to be something that's going to happen. You're not going to start moving dirt in 6 months. It's just not going to happen. It takes longer than that. So you're talking probably a 3-year arc, at least at the very most aggressive. And so more realistically, probably more in that 5 to 7 year frame. So again, that just sort of helps people, but the work has to still be done to get there, right? And so you want to channel that energy. And I think there's a lot of intermediary steps, right? So there's our process, which sort of look at need and kind of understand what the space priorities would be. And then there's the handing off of our report to an architecture/engineering firm. We can give you guys some suggestions on those. We don't work with them directly, but there's a number of really good ones that do work in Maine and New Hampshire that we're familiar with and that are good, that can actually start looking at feasibility, and we'll start giving you some drawings. And then that's really exciting for people, because then they get to see what this thing would look like, or a concept for what it would look like. And then there's site plans and all of that other stuff that comes downstream from that. But it's helping people understand that that there's a process, and there's certain things that just because you're not going to get it tomorrow doesn't mean that you're not making progress towards it. We get really excited, honestly, when we've presented out projects and the select board, their next step says, yeah, let's allocate some money towards feasibility, site plans, and construction drawings, because that's a really good next step, because that shows that your select board is interested in moving the concept forward.
One issue, Bob, I'm Mark Waltz, Assistant Town Manager, that I think we would need your help dealing with is exactly what is feasible to put in the building. I think if we made a mistake in our survey, it might have been we threw out a bunch of possible things, and we made the mistake of putting aquatics, and it really got latched onto. And I think that's probably, at least from my perspective, if anything, that's probably would drastically increase the cost of the building, as well as the ongoing maintenance and stuff. Is that stuff you can help sort out, whether there really is enough, or how much it would cost, or whether there's enough interest in the community to pay for that type of thing?
Yeah. So aquatics are, everyone latches on to aquatics. It'll double the cost of your facility, roughly, to do it like an indoor pool. Now, the other side to that is indoor aquatics it's a revenue producer for the facility. So, it's expensive, certainly a cost center, but it's also a revenue center for the building too. So whether that's, maybe and again, this is something we could figure out, or, would be part of the process, is would people be willing to pay a fee to use the building, or to use certain parts of the building, right? So that could be a low monthly membership cost, or annual membership cost, like they do in Kittery. Or it could be, there's a charge to use certain spaces, and aquatics is certainly one of those areas that can be a revenue center for the building. A lot of times what we end up seeing is that buildings are designed with aquatics as an option, as like a phase 2. So your first phase is to get the activity space that you need, and then you have the plans in place to add aquatics in a second phase, or a third phase down the line.
Okay, thanks.
I'm Leslie, and I am wondering, and I'm not sure exactly how to phrase this, but so we would contract with you for a certain amount of money. And I wonder if you could help us to understand if that can be broken, exactly how that happens, like what we end up asking you for and how much that would be. I don't know if maybe others have a better way of asking, but I'm just wondered if you could talk about that.
Do you have a checklist that
Yeah.
kind of what you offer, what you can do, and then kind of help them with making the decision of,
Sure.
where to spend it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can give you a scope. I can give you a more detailed scope of work and break that down. For us, we're not consultants. So we UNH pays my salary. So Matt and I are not. So whatever costs we have on this generally cover time. And honestly, most of our money goes to support our graduate students and our student assistants on these projects. So we're not. I can tell you a full-blown needs assessment, if you were to contract with a commercial consulting firm, can run $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, sometimes more, depending on the scope. And that's just not what we do. Now we're honest about what we can deliver and what we can't. We're not going to give you drawings. We can't give you schematics of a building, which a lot of those places can do. What we can do is give you really good background research, do a really good job with public engagement and public input. And that would be surveys, focus groups, some kind of we call them pop-up public input, but where we show up at an event that you guys are doing. Maybe it's a farmer's market or a summer concert series or something like that. And we set up a table and we just engage people as they're coming through. So it's a really low time commitment. What we found is like the big, large format town meetings, they don't add any value to these things because it's really hard to get people to come out. Can never find a time that works for the community at large. They don't really add much. So, public input for us is usually stakeholder focus groups. We talk a little bit more about what that looks like. Usually 6 to 8 of them. We've done up to 10, depending on how many groups you want to put together. A survey that we would typically do online, but we can also make paper surveys available for those who don't have online access. And that survey, I'd like to see what you all have done because I don't want to duplicate that. But these surveys that we use generally tend to be pretty deep dives. They're not short, but they do tend to give us really good deep data, especially on those willingness to pay questions and space needs questions, things like that. Prioritization, like what would be, if you could have only these things, what would those things be? So that kind of is how the survey looks.
We weren't far off.
Yeah. So, and again, I don't want to repeat the wheel. So, reinvent the wheel. So if you've already done it, you've got good data, I'd love to see your survey. So, maybe we can be more focused with the survey that we're doing and not just repeating what you've all done. So that tends to be the process. We also have a number of planning tools and metrics that we use. So there's metrics around desired square footage for indoor recreation space in communities, and we'll give you those metrics. So we'll give you some desired targets, some level of service analysis there. What do you have and what do you need and what's the gap? We'll also give you a market analysis report for your area in terms of what are things, not just like people's perceptions of their needs, but like what are people actually doing in your sort of area of your service area. So what are the kinds of recreation activities that have market potential? So we'll do that for you. So there's a number of sort of background research kinds of things that we'll do. And then we'll give you some examples of facilities that based on the other side of this, where we think, so we've got a sort of a library of facilities, benchmark facilities that we've used. And so we can show you different examples of communities that have done different things, how much it costs, what it costs to operate, maintain, what are the amenities that they have in them. So.
That's great.
Yeah, that's great. So just for a follow-up, so we'd have our first meeting and give you lots of details? And then in that, somewhere in there, we would decide we want this, 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 and this.
Mhm.
And then we would know a price from you? Is it that type of a thing? Or is it better that it's for, X amount of dollars, you're going to give us this. Is it?
Yeah. Right. So for a standard project like this, what we would do, so if we did meetings, 6 to 8 focus groups, some level of service analysis and benchmarking, online survey, paper survey available to those who can't complete them, and a pop-up activity. Generally, we would charge about $10,000 for that. And again, that's just really covering time more than it is anything else. And then you would get on the back end of that a report and a presentation to your select board if you would want us to do that, a public presentation of the results.
How much time is spent at the pop-up activity?
Depends on the activity, and it depends on what we need to get, quite frankly. I mean, so, we did a project in York just recently. Honestly, it was a small scope project around senior center needs, older adult programming, and we showed up at the drive-through lunch event, and we went car to car and talked to people with a clipboard. And so that we were there for a couple of hours, but we've also done other activities where we are there a little bit longer. So it really kind of just depends. Depends on the event.
We have a fair in August, so I was wondering if that would be the type of thing that might be.
I was also thinking of the food truck event that we're talking about that we have in the budget. That, bringing people around, and they're talking about community events, and we're talking about musicians and business expo, and this
Yeah.
is something that we have in the budget. So I'm thinking this would be a classic perfect place for it.
Yeah, I participated in our comprehensive plan update committee, and so we did have to do a lot of community engagement for that. And so my particular focus in my questioning to you about this is how to reach the most diverse number of people, because obviously if you're going to go to a sporting event, you're going to get sports friendly people. If you go to a senior event, you're going to get senior event people. And so because we don't have a communal place, aside from, like, as Mark and Pam are saying, like, a town-wide event, or like the grocery store, which isn't even going to be all the people from our town, because it's going to be, that's one of our challenges. So what we did when we did the comp plan update is there was actually money in the budget to do an event. We actually made an event that was then a community engagement event to get people's opinions. The whole point of the thing was people's opinions. And we had vendors, but then there's food, and it just becomes much more involved. And I know you're not at a high scale thing, but I also want to make sure that we are going to be able to reach people, because it's a big challenge in our community to reach people. We have a hard time getting people to town meeting to vote. So I'm just wondering, like, your capacity versus like what we actually need.
So with something like that pop-up event, usually we'll have the majority of our focus groups already completed, and we'll have some initial data from the surveys that we can sort of quickly blow through and get a sense of who's underrepresented demographically. And then we can sort of choose that pop-up event based on where we need to do some purposeful sampling. So we either look for a deep representation of a broad audience. That's why, Bob mentioned the farmers market. I love doing events at farmers market because it is a nice broad appeal across socioeconomic strata, age, gender, everything. But there's, we'll choose where and when makes sense based on what populations we need to hone in on a little more tightly. Or if it is that sort of overall, we just need more people to do a deeper dive, we can have that conversation then. For that broad audience input, we tend to rely more on the survey for the broad data, and then do deeper dives on the focus groups with purposeful focus groups. So, we'll have a focus group that is entirely made up of older adults. We'll have a focus group of those sports people. We'll have a focus group of outdoor recreation people, and we'll get those various takes on the situation, and everyone's going to have their own wants and needs. And then it's sort of on our end to weigh those various wants and needs against one another, against the greater good and what we're getting from the broad survey data, and see where it matches up and where it doesn't.
So one of the things we would do is work with you to really identify who those sort of key stakeholders are that you would want to have voices represented in the focus groups. And I'll give you some examples of what other towns have done and how they've sort of put those together. So they give you sort of the kind of representative of different stakeholder groups, and then your survey really is going to give you the broad swath of the town. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's always a challenge, and it's one of the things it's why we've sort of moved away from doing the Tuesday night town meeting to talk about the community center, because you get, if you can get 30 people there, you're lucky.
Yeah.
And those 30 tend to be on the fringes, either
Right.
very anti.
Right. Well, I mean, we, like Leslie and a few other members of the committee at the time, were at our transfer station on Saturday morning handing out surveys. So that was like one place, but it's a subgroup, I guess, people who actually bring their trash.
Yeah.
But it's a very subgroup of
Yeah.
Right.
varied ages.
Yeah, and so that's it. And we, so we can do a couple things. I mean, we could talk a little bit about how to do this, and maybe it may be us coming up and doing a pop-up event, and then maybe it's working with you and giving you the tools as well to hit those areas that you think, basically you helping us do more than one. So if there's a need to get a broader range, and you think that the transfer station is a good place to do that, maybe it's working with you as volunteers to help us with that. So we
That's
want
actually a neat idea. That's a neat idea, because I think we're going to have at least one Bowdoin intern again this summer, so we can help train them, and they could help us go, say, multiple times to the transfer station and
Mhm.
talk to people there or something.
And
Yeah, because,
certainly-
I mean, we're going to be limited in our ability, I mean, to get up and back. And so it's not like if we were doing a project in Hampton or Farmington or something like that, where it's a 2-minute drive for us, or 5-minute or 10-minute drive. You guys are a little bit farther. So we need to sort of think about how we manage that time, but that doesn't mean we can't also be exactly working with you or working with your intern at Bowdoin, who's going to be up there to do more of those events.
And thank you for that. I mean, part of why I'm asking is for the other members of the committee too, to be thinking about what our time commitment is to doing a project, because we want to make sure, like, we worked hard to get the 1,000 survey responses that we got. But I don't know how many you would want, so, how much because I think it's important for us to be thinking of what our personal time commitment is to help you be successful. So.
Yeah. Right. And so we've always had decent survey response. And when I say decent, I mean, it's never like 50% of the town, right? But we always hit the numbers that we need. And there's kind of a scientific formula, kind of a wonky table that we use to try to get an ideal sample size, right? And we also do know that, our surveys tend to skew in certain, I mean, this is true of all community surveys, they tend to skew in certain ways. So typically we'll see our surveys they'll skew older. So they tend to represent older voices. They tend to be predominantly, especially household surveys tend to be predominantly female, to the tune of 60 to 70% of the respondents being women.
The decision making.
Exactly. Actually, you're right. I mean, that's exactly right.
No comment.
It's actually, there's some research on that shows that is still the case in many homes. So we know where the surveys tend to skew, and we'll report that out. But I still think in the end you get a pretty good. We will make sure you get a pretty good representation of your community.
Well, Well, I mean, certainly looking at the previous reports that you've done, I heard a lot of similar themes to what we heard on our survey and our open comment section. So we know that at least it seems like you've heard a lot of the same types of things we've heard, so.
Yeah, it's funny because every community is a little different, but at the end of the day, we've done, how many of these we've done, Matt? 20, 25 over the last however many years. And, at the end of the day, they're all pretty similar. So it is kind of funny, but there's nuances in every community. Every community has their, how you position the project on the other end, to really resonate with community priorities is as important as anything else. So even though the needs might be similar in York to Hampton to Topsham, at the end of the day, what resonates with your residents is going to be different than those other communities. So that's how you position the project so that you can really get broad support when it comes to actually a vote.
I just want to say, guys, real quick, I just checked that table, and your 1,000 surveys gets you to a 3% margin of error on your population size. You guys did a heck of a job getting 1,000 surveys out of a population of 80.
Hey, is that good?
That's what I was gonna ask.
We figured it out pretty well. I think they did a good job with, we had postcards, we have a local paper that goes out monthly. We had online, and it really, it was a good, you'll see, it was a good mixture of a message. And we had said to the selectmen when we started the process, what's a good number? And they said 1,000. And the day that we came in, it was 999.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So.
What would
How
your
many-
time frame be? Oh,
Go ahead, I'm
That's your
sorry.
question.
No, I was going to say, how many did you get when you did your town comp plan? Did you do a survey? Was there a survey that went out as a part of that? And what was your end for that?
We
I don't
didn't
think
do
there
an
were-
online survey, did we?
No.
I'd have to look. I'm not really sure, because what we did was, we had people could come and vote. There was like a flip chart set up, and I mean, there were renderings, people put dots on things. I'd have to go back and look to see exactly, but it was like a very involved from a bunch of different.
They had, what they created was, we have a lower village and the one thing you'll see with Topsham is Topsham doesn't have a town center.
Yeah.
And that's one of the issues that we deal with. So down in the lower village by the river, just as you go into Brunswick, was an old fire station that we used to have before we built the new complex. And we built a pop-up park and kind of fenced it off with hay bales and had pop-ups. And there was a couple of food trucks there one night with music. We showed a movie. We showed Wonder Woman on the big screen one night, and had all sorts of different type of vendors. And it was like a 3-day process that just had people come in and out and participate and answer questions. And the flip charts were up there where people could mark things. And it was done in September, the end of September.
Yeah, and we had some sessions.
And we had sessions
Yeah.
on certain things.
Yeah, because it was like, there were so many different components, so they brought in people to talk about like transportation or to talk about housing or something, so it was also
Natural
workshops,
resources, yeah.
too.
There were, that was in 2017. Can you believe that?
Sent out a
That was in
questionnaire.
2017.
You definitely sent out a questionnaire, because
Yeah.
I remember giving feedback as to what my dream town would look like.
Oh, that might have been at the event though.
Really?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's on our town website if you want to look at it. I'm sure the tools that we used are there, but I think the survey was you had to be at the place. I'm not sure we sent it out, but he could be right. I can't remember.
I just always like to look at that because we typically tend to beat the comp plan survey in terms of numbers. So it's always good. So that always tends to be our benchmark. I mean, there's a scientific target, but it's like, well, we beat the comp plan. So that was good.
Okay, great. Well, we'll talk to the town
Well,
planner
I'll
about
try
this.
to, I'll walk across the hall.
Yeah. All right, well, did you want to ask something?
Yeah, Bob and Matt, I have 2 questions. One, of the 20 that you guys have worked on, how many would you consider successful? As far as recovery, cost recovery, I guess, what is best for the town? Were there any failures along those 20?
I think there's a lot that are still in the process, quite frankly. I mean, because it just takes a long time to get these things over the finish line. And so I like to think success really is like, is the project moving forward? And so, we're still waiting on a project that's ready to move dirt. Like, we're still waiting to see one come to fruition. I mean, there's been a number of projects we've worked on that have moved to site feasibility studies and construction plans and things along those lines. But we're still waiting on a community to pass the bond and go for it. But I mean, to some extent that's out of our control because it's, at the end of the day, it's the voters moving on it. But
Sure, I was thinking more along the lines of centers that had been built.
Oh,
Moving forward after that, were there any that show that maybe they shouldn't have moved forward with it, or have they all been relatively successful and well attended?
Maybe a membership fee model that didn't pan out the way they were expected to or something.
yeah. I mean, I haven't seen that with the membership fee model. I could think of a couple that were built on sort of were funded through like a revenue bond process. And that have struggled to meet their revenue targets in terms of paying off the bond. And Matt probably knows who I'm talking about, but
I think there's also been a couple who chose to move forward with a renovation as opposed to a new construction and have regretted that decision.
right.
And again, I don't even know if that's an option on the table in terms of how old the school. No, you said you just built a new school. So sometimes the school will be coming offline and they'll say, this is make a great new rec center. And it costs what a new build would have cost and has 30% of the amenities. So
I guess the second part would be, I looked through a lot of your projects. I thought they were really well done and informative, but one of the things I got caught up on each time was the cost recoveries. So I'm curious if you're ever able to break those cost recoveries down into categories such as we spoke about earlier, aquatics versus gym, just to see if something like aquatics is something that should be put on the table that's not on the table, or how much revenue comes from a gym, how much revenue comes from outdoor facilities. I'm just wondering if it is ever able to be broken down into categories.
Well, that's a good question. So I'm trying to think of when we look at cost recovery, when we've looked at cost recovery in the past, we're generally looking at it in the aggregate, right? I'm trying to think, Matt, how we might be able to drill down to that level of detail.
Well, I mean, one of the tricky parts is that cost recovery isn't as black and white as it might seem, right? So part of what we will be able to come up with is information around what people think is a fair model for payment. There are going to be a fair number of people who said this building is built and staffed with public money. I already paid for it. Why should I be paying to use it again? If that's the majority of your community members, then charging a premium for use of that facility isn't going to fly. But if there's high willingness to pay and people realize that for high quality service and amenities, you need to pay a premium, then great. The recovery is not going to be a problem. I think that discussion happens, frankly, at multiple levels, even at the sort of municipal and department level. We work with towns where, single digit cost recovery for the entire recreation department is just fine. And then we get departments, rec makes something like 700% of their yearly tax allocation on a single event. They do a beer and chili festival that's very well attended. So it's just...
We could get in on that.
Well,
We're
good.
good with that.
Working on those chili recipes. It's a money maker.
Well, and there's some just general truisms, right? So you don't typically make a lot of money off of a gym, for regular programming, but you can for rentals. So when you rent to outside groups, aquatics facilities typically tend to be revenue generators because you can charge membership fees to be able to use the pool. Same thing with fitness centers, depending on how large the scope of the fitness center is, right? You potentially could, again, that's maybe part of a membership fee, or it could be sort of an add-on in terms of how you price. So you're not making a lot of money off of a gym just with regular programming. But now rentals, you certainly can. Function rooms, so number of community centers now are including commercial kitchens and some kind of a multi-purpose function room. Again, that could be rented to outside groups for things like weddings and graduation parties and things like that. And we're seeing a trend with just renting space out in that facility to local businesses to do sort of, again, the pop-up concept, right? But, renting space in the facility for the local Taekwondo instructor to come in and run Taekwondo programs. So you're not running the program, but you're providing the space for the entrepreneur to come in and run those programs for yoga or whatever it might be. So those are the revenue generators and the revenue generation potential in a facility like that.
Yeah, there's
So when you reach out to your benchmark communities for that information, they just give you a lump number. They don't give you any more information other than that.
Yeah, it's hard to really get them to drill down because they may not be, they may have the data, but they may not have it categorized easily. And then, you're working with the data that people are giving you. So it's kind of hard to drill down to that level. Now, what will happen is when you eventually pass this off to, you take our report and you say, okay, we want to move forward and work with, engineering firm, architectural firm to start to develop plans, they will actually do a pretty detailed financial analysis for you on the cost side and on the revenue side. And they'll be able to look at how all your spaces can be monetized. So we'll be able to give you some big picture numbers. They'll be able to drill down once they start actually looking at the space in your facility and what its market potential might be. So I think that's really kind of phase two. That's your next, that's when you get into feasibility.
Sure. Thank you.
Well, we can give you pretty close benchmarks on kind of what it would look like. I think our numbers generally are pretty good. They'll give you at least a good benchmark.
You lost it?
No, I didn't. I
Do
think
you
it's
have any
changed.
No, I was gonna steal your question about the time frame for.
You can steal
Yeah.
That was just the one question that I had. My name's Rob, about just the time frame from as we just kick off this collaboration, from like our first meeting tonight through a finalized report. Can you just give us a general idea as to what that time frame typically looks like?
Sure. 4 to 6 months, 6 months on the long end, 4 months on the short. Some of it's dependent upon, it's dependent on a lot of things. So it's dependent on, so like COVID happened in the middle of a couple projects, right? So there was that. But, it depends on meeting scheduling. Sometimes the project is wrapped and then we're just waiting to get on select board's schedule, right? Calendar. So I think good frame of typically when we write scope, 4 to 6 months, I think, and that's good for the whole project. I like to be sort of realistic there. It doesn't tend to go longer than that unless there's a reason for it to go longer. Portland is a good example. Portland wrapped up, we got done, and they had at the time, they had a major refugee issue, and they dealing with that took up all the energy in the city essentially. And so they put our project on hold. And so we were done. We delivered the final report, but it just extended the time frame to get a wrap on it. But so things like that happen. But
There's also little things like if you experience a significant population swell in the summer, for example, you know, if you wanted to capture that
Right.
or purposefully not capture that, depending on what the committee was. So it like that can affect it.
This time of year matter for your committee, going into the summer, since that's kind of where we're headed right now?
Well, I think summer works for us because we have there's less going on with at the university, so we're able to devote more focus time to a project like this. You know, when it's happening when we've done them during the academic year, it's just we're juggling other things. So, but I think 4 to 6 months generally is about right on most of these projects. Again, it just depends on how quickly we can move and get meetings, focus groups set up, and we would work with you on identifying those and helping us to get people to turn out.
So if we could get the select board's approval, say to the budget by the end of March, feasibility, something we could probably work on early summer or through the summer and then have results in the fall. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Matt, does that sound right?
Yeah, that's what that sounds perfect, actually. Yeah.
Yeah,
Are you guys,
it's ideal.
So we're looking for Matt.
are you guys committed yet to anybody moving through the summer? Like, how many projects do you typically work on at a time?
So I've kind of set a rule of one project at a time. We had at one point we were juggling 3 or 4 projects at once, and it was like, wait, is that Portland? Is it Farmington? Is it Hampton? You know, because at some point they all kind of run together. But we had a period where everybody was looking for a project, and we had them sort of staggered, so we were able to get them all done. But we're not going to do that anymore, and we haven't done that in a while. So we've really focused on one project at a time. So we don't have any projects in the hopper. I do have a project that's further behind you guys that will likely hit, but we'll likely probably start them in the fall. And they're more local. So, but it would be you would have our full attention.
Right.
So I'm kind of thinking timeline, and I'm thinking that tomorrow I can send you a copy of the survey, and tomorrow I can send you the video of the presentation. And then you can send us back the schematic for, you know, for range of scope of services. But then I'm thinking you guys need to get together and kind of decide on the scope of services, what you want and what you're going to request. So we're already not on the first week of March. Our select board only meets twice a month, and they meet the first and third Thursday of the month. So I see us not going before them until the beginning of April. In all honesty, I see us, I mean, we were just setting a date unless we change our minds here as far as when we get together again, but we've been meeting monthly. And so I see us getting together, like we talked earlier, March 28th, to review your recommendation, and then take that, you give us a price, and then we take that to the selectmen, right?
Yes.
Unless we could meet early, because the select board has to have the agenda 10 days before.
Right.
So it'd be like the Wednesday of the week before the 28th. So if we could maybe move it up 1 week, and then we'd be ready to do that first Thursday in April.
It started by
Did the
May.
21st work for you guys?
That works for me.
I
Sure
think
thing.
so.
Yeah.
The
and
one,
if-
the beauty of not kicking it out too far is we start losing people to summer vacations. So as we're trying to put those stakeholder groups together, you know, it's high enough to Disney World.
Why don't we plan that tomorrow? You'll send me your scope of services and costs and that portion that I can share with the committee. And I, in turn, will send you the survey and the results and the video and that type of thing. And we'll plan to get together on the 21st.
Yeah.
To review things, and if you can do you want to have them keep that night open? So if we have any questions or anything, we'll meet maybe like at 7 o'clock or something. So at 6:30, we could meet and kind of take a look at it and make decisions. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And then at 7, we'll meet with you guys on the 21st. I know I'll see you the week before at the Samoset, right? You guys are presenting.
Yes, I actually think we are at MRPA. We might be.
We're at Mass on the 21st. Yeah.
You're in Mass on the 21st, because you're in Maine on the 14th.
We're in
Yeah.
Maine on the 14th, and we're at MRP, the other MRPA, on the 21st. So we won't be free on that date. But if you have questions,
You can put them together and get an
Yeah.
answer and
of course,
that out
yeah,
within.
yeah.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
collate them, and we'd be happy to answer. But I can get you a scope tomorrow. I can give you a scope with a scope of work with. Actually, if you could send me your survey, so I can take a look at that. We still may want to do a survey, but it just might, change what we do.
Probably ask different questions. Yeah.
When I leave tonight, I'll walk in and send it. So,
Okay. And then I will send you the scope of work tomorrow. So you can kind of see, it'll be roughly what I laid out, right? So kind of the same sorts of activities, background research, benchmarking, level of service, focus groups, probably one pop-up activity or one pop-up event that we would do, a survey.
And chili.
Beer and chili.
Chili.
We'll create something new. We're all for it.
Friends group, survey, and fundraiser all in one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Before we go, I just had one question, since you made the point about this being a long process for us. I was just wondering, like, our needs around meeting as a community and having recreational opportunities, it will exist for the next, 7 to 10 years. And so I was just wondering, as you collect information, do you include kind of any tiered recommendations? Like, in the short term, we recommend you could do this as your fundraising for a center, or, a second tier, if you are able to partial raise funds, we recommend this. Is that at all how you frame recommendations?
We have, depending on the community, right? If it's really obvious that there's interim steps that need to happen, we've done that for sure. Like, these are your near-term priorities. One of the things we will do on this, if again, depending on what the survey looks like that you've already collected, is we do sort of push people into, like, is this a near-term priority? Is this a midterm priority? Is this a long-term priority? Or is it not a priority? So we kind of try to push people into thinking timeframes in terms of their needs. And that it informs, for us at least, a timeframe for development on some of this.
I guess where I was also thinking with that is also cost wise, like, and maybe that isn't what you do. Maybe that's more of a feasibility thing of, like, if you had $1 million, if you had $500,000, I mean, I'm just making this up, but, like, what could you do to meet some of those needs in your community with varying levels of resources, I guess? Or is that not what you do?
I would say it depends, and that's probably an unsatisfying answer, but I think it depends on the community. So, like, for example, we worked with, Matt, I'm thinking of Derry, New Hampshire. So we knew that Derry had already passed a bond for, I forget how much that bond was for, Matt, was it like $1 million or 750,000? Or it was a fairly sizable amount of money to do renovations on a building. And then they put a pause on that. And they said, we really didn't do a needs assessment process. So they asked us to come in and do a needs assessment process. So we knew they had that money ready to spend. So what we had to do through that process was really identify, was it prudent for them to go spend that money on a renovation of a building that really would not meet their needs? Or was it more prudent for them to pursue other things and reallocate that $750,000 to other projects that came up as more immediate needs? So I'm thinking Derry was a good example of that. So I guess it depends on the community, depending on how we do those recommendations, right? And that's just one example of sort of how we might do that.
What you will get is access to the raw data that shows, like, on the survey data, if we do a new survey, or even on your existing survey, it'll help with at least the community's priorities in terms of specific amenities or facility amenities or whatever. So everybody is all in on an aquatic center, then, you know, that's there, that's prioritized, that's a huge cost center. If you're going to off an option, then all right, do people really want fitness facilities, or is everyone's fitness needs being perfectly well adequately met through Planet Fitness and other commercial entities? Most of the time, I'll tell you that everyone's pretty happy with their gym. They're not looking to get their pump on at the local community center. They're looking for, you know, pick up basketball and a place to go socialize. So
I think that would be a third rail with our select board too, if they thought we were competing with the local fitness centers, so.
Yeah.
it's actually something that we're always really cognizant of. You know, you can't be creating government that are going to put local businesses out of business. That's not good practice.
Another thing just to kind of keep as a feather in your hat to be aware of is that through the process, we've learned very clearly that we're part of the school district with 4 towns other than us. And our town certainly feels the burden of the other 3 because we're the larger one. And there is certainly a feeling of, we're not here to meet everybody else's needs. We're here to meet our residents' needs. And there's that direct message we got from the selectmen that, yeah, they can come and they can pay extra to be part of you. But we want our, am I explaining
no,
it?
you are.
I mean,
Yeah,
they want us to focus on ours.
But that's relevant when you look at numbers too, though, because when you can't just look at Topsham's population, you'd have to look at the surrounding towns too, I guess, to think about who might want to use it.
Yeah, but
Right.
there is that edge that we have to be
Yeah.
very aware of because our town has dealt with the burden as far as the school. We've dealt with the burden as far as the rescue and police and fire in the mutual aid type of stuff. So there's a definite feeling of we've got to be careful on where and how we would go about that.
So Pam, is your scope, is your current scope of service, does it encompass those 4 towns? In other words,
For some programs, there are certain seasons like fall outdoors, yes.
I think, is he talking about the survey? You're talking about the survey, Bob?
Are you talking
No, I
about
think he
this?
means who plays in your sports.
Yeah,
No,
you're talking about participates.
right, I'm talking about like looking at your
Correct,
service
yeah.
area.
I feel like everybody's ours. Is that clear?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Well, because of the year that it was, because of COVID, we ended up carrying the weight for a few towns. That's not the normal. But it happened this year because it was what was right for the kids in the district, and we did it. But in normal, during the summer and the fall and the spring, we do open. We work within the district. We take the kids from Bowden, Bodenham, and Harpswell. During the winter, we try to kind of take care of our own needs for programs. But this year that wasn't necessarily the case for space, so we kept everybody playing.
You have a sliding fee scale for the out-of-towners?
We charge them a non-residency fee.
Okay.
But this winter that didn't happen because each town kind of had their own own teams, but they came to us to play. So it won't happen again. It happened because
But
of
would
COVID,
you
yeah.
need an answer from us about whether or not we would be wanting them to be included or not? Because it seems like you might want to know that.
Well, go ahead, Bob.
No, I was just going to say, we do have a screen question on the survey that asks residency. So are they residents or taxpayers in Topsham versus not? And so that doesn't mean we would throw that data away if they're non-residents or taxpayers, but we would run some crosstabs to make sure that, you know, you're capturing any differences that might exist between your residents and your non-residents.
And if there's user conflict, we'll hear that loud and clear.
I wouldn't necessarily go, unless you feel like it's something you would want, I wouldn't necessarily go out of your way to recruit non-residents. They will find the survey and they will fill it out. But, you know, like I said, we have a screen for residency. So you know,
It's almost the opposite. I think if we got too many non-residents would be upsetting the select board, so it might actually
Yeah.
cost us some of our support.
right.
I guess,
So, yeah.
is it more of like a question then around the feasibility rather than what you're doing? Because I guess what I was just asking is that, do we have to decide now whether or not we would need to include them, consider them in terms of the volume of people who'd be using, or is it really, we would just focus on Topsham and decide later we're gonna include them or not include? That's more a feasibility thing, right?
It'd be
Right.
down.
That's down the road. So right now you just want to get a vision for this. I think what you're looking for is a vision for the building. Like what do your residents sort of see in what this building could look like, or what this space would consist of, and their own sort of willingness to pay for that. And their time horizons. So I think later on, you're going to look at those questions of scope of services and carrying capacity and those sorts of things. But that's going to come down to, you know, because like if you look at planning benchmarks would say, you know, 1 to 2 square feet of indoor recreation space per resident. That's generally the benchmark that gets used. So when you look at your resident population, that's going to give you a rough indication of what the need is for square footage. But if you start thinking about 4 towns, then that's going to dramatically increase your square footage. And if your residents are the ones that are primarily paying for that, that's kind of a political non-starter. So
That would happen.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
Great.
We have a plan.
Yeah.
We know what to do in the next few steps, right?
So next step, we'll get you'll get me the survey. We'll get you a scope of work with a rough timeline. And then we can go from there. And if you all have any questions, just reach out to either me or Matt or both, and we'll answer them. And we'll go from there.
That's great.
That sounds great. Thank you both for your
Thank
time.
you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's great to meet you all. And Pam, I'll see you at MRPA, and we'll both see you there. Maybe we can meet and just kind of talk a little bit and get some more background.
Sounds like a plan.
Great.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I think we want to ask about that. You're like, when is your tour
I know,
in
we're
Chile
doing it.
happening?
We're doing it. I make a killer venison chili.
Are you comfortable with that? I mean,
Yeah.
I've participated in sessions. They are facilitators. I don't know Matt as well as I know Bob, but they do a good job of facilitation. They're easy to talk to. We've had many debates on coaching and parents coaching and all sorts of how do you lead them and where do you get them in a certain way and that type of thing with him, because he's raised his own kids in his community and has done his share of coaching. So he has a lot of wide spectrum of experience.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell from my questions, my thing is we just have to make sure what we're asking is they can actually do. I mean, $10,000 is not that much money when it comes down to it and their staff. So we would just have to be satisfied with what they can give us.
And from reading what they've done in the past, it's great information.
Yeah.
I don't understand. So the feasibility study. So I know we'd go on to request for proposal with an architect and an engineer, but who does the feasibility study?
Feasibility is that. Feasibility is going to say that,
That's the
you
request
know,
for
from
RFP.
your needs assessment, this is what we see you need to go to the next steps. This is what you need for land. This is what you need for parking. This is what you need, you know, based upon what your survey said and what you've said from this you want to go with. This is how and where and
And
you
that's
make that
done by
happen.
an engineer
And,
and an architect.
And he
architect.
mentioned I would be able to drill down on the costs. too.
Yeah. So they'd say
it's
you
kind of an
can't get this
all-in-one.
without, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I think, you know, some of the stuff I heard him saying in the back of my head, and I will be honest with you, I just had this heart-wrenching conversation with the guy from Farmington, Maine, who is a young professional and they have a community center. He has 2 staff, himself and an assistant. And he doesn't, I mean, he's got a master's degree in business and he has a minor, his BA in recreation, but he's there 80 hours a week to run it. And he doesn't have a staff to clean the facility. He doesn't have a lot of that stuff. And so the selectmen recognized that and put a big raise in for him this year. And the community is going wild, you know? And so he, you know, he called just looking for other communities, the same size, what we do and the whole thing. And that's, I mean, I remember Wiscasset. You lost probably two of the best recreation directors at the time because it took so much time. So in my head, I'm thinking, if we're building this, we increase our staff now with programming and with things that we can make happen. So that when the building gets here, there's not as much you have to absorb there at that time. It's kind of built into the budget already. Because I will tell you, if there's one thing I think we've done not well, we built a library. We never thought about who's gonna clean the driveway or who's gonna sweep the sidewalk and keep it de-iced and that part. We built a municipal building. We never thought about it. And so those are things that we've acquired and gotten. That's what our guys that make ice in the winter time do on their day, their other days.
To
But-
take the ice away from one driveway, and
Put it on
build it
another.
another.
But those are things that I think throughout the whole process, we have to think about how do we afford everything that comes with it? And how do we make that happen?
And you're saying, because I was asking about staffing, that all would happen in the feasibility study in our, or we would make sure that that was discussed.
I would make sure, I
Yeah,
can tell
yeah,
you,
okay,
yeah.
because
Okay.
quite frankly, you built this and I'll be saying goodbye.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Soon not quite
Yeah,
around,
right.
depending on the
Yeah.
schedule, so.
Did you guys understand my question? I feel like you didn't understand my question about the tiered approach. What I was saying is that could, you know, the two questions that I asked, I don't think he answered, and that's fine, which is a community center seems like an end result to something, but what is really the need? What is the thing that we're craving in our community? And so maybe building a building isn't actually the thing, and he's gonna look at what do we have existing.
That's what I'm hoping we're gonna get, Mary
But the
Kay.
thing is that there could be a tiered approach to it. It might be like, if we're able to raise this amount, then we would build a place. But if we can't, can we still have some type of community option that is leveraging existing things through relationships?
Well, and that's
One-
my thought with the tiered
Yes.
approach is when I'm saying to you
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking is you bring on the staff, you begin to build up the programs to more of a capacity.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a lot more space in the winter time other than
Yeah.
after COVID
Yeah.
and restrictions we have there, but you do the other stuff, the outdoor stuff
Yeah.
and that portion of it, and then build it up from there.
well,
Yeah,
and also I read in the notes that you sent us, one of the things that I put, copied was for the public outreach and community engagement, one of the things they say is based on needs identified through market research and community engagement, determine not less than 3 scenarios of facility and program scope, size, feature, and amenities. So that's what I thought of when you said
Yeah.
that is,
Yeah.
so you may do this, you may do this,
Yeah,
you may
that's-
do this.
yeah,
And whether or not
basically.
it's sequential
Yeah.
and building on it,
Right.
or it's just 3 options, all of
yes.
that is good information.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, but I'm also saying too, can we start sooner? Like, do we have to wait
Mhm.
until we actually are at the end of the line, or could we start inching as a parallel process towards once,
Well-
as we're getting feedback from people, and
Yeah.
say, people are saying this, and you're good about being
It's sort of
responsive
what
about
Pam
that.
just alluded to, though, I thought, was kind of building the staff ahead of time and
Well, right, but what
With
I
building
also mean is
staff,
like you're
money
finding
coming
out
back.
people's needs along the way, and so you are as responsive as you can be. But what I'm saying is there might be other information that we're gathering along the way that we realize, oh, I didn't even realize there was a need for this. Can we start to meet this need now, or do we have to wait 7 years
well,
before we can do that?
And maybe
And-
there's partnerships with the fairgrounds. or
Yes,
something that allow
yeah,
us to do some
exactly. I'm
stuff
just saying,
sooner.
can we
Yeah.
be proactive with the information we're gathering rather than just sit on it and just wait until we have all our ducks in a row?
I would think
and
so.
Pam, you're
Yeah.
talking about building
All in
staff, which is
favor?
building programs.
Right.
You know, so you're, I think it's great for something that we can just be aware of as a community,
Yeah,
to hear those things and think about those things and have
Yeah.
the big picture
Yeah.
plan.
that's why we're
Yeah, I
paying the money, right? To get that information.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's certainly that values in the information and, you know, he said a lot of things that, there was a lot of detail to what he said. But 2 things that stuck out to me were he used the term partners a lot.
Mhm.
And then and he also said, we're really good at public engagement, which we've talked about transparency and really getting to those other groups, not the people sitting in the bleachers at the basketball game or, so I think, you know, I'm excited with that group. I think it's exciting.
Mhm.
And I think it's a great opportunity for us and the timing sounds ideal for us and them.
You know who might be a partner to help us reach more elderly folks in Topsham, this 55+ center. It's Stacy came to one of the select board meetings about a month ago. And she said there's a large number of Topsham residents that are members of 55+. She might be able to help us identify ones that want to contribute or something.
It'd also be interesting, and maybe there's somebody that would be interested in the committee, right? You know,
She doesn't live in Thompson.
No, yeah,
no, but the
he meant some of our members.
members, yeah.
Oh,
She
yeah,
may-
she could identify.
No,
somebody.
well, I'll keep my political mouth.
Are we still recording?
Yeah.
Yes.
But we may be taking.
We could take a quick recess.
Executive
Yeah.
session.
I'm gonna go recess.
Okay, so the last thing on our agenda is next steps for our committee action steps. We have a meeting on the 21st.
Yeah.
I did follow up just to add, because I didn't put it on the agenda, we had talked about me getting in touch with Jay and finding out if we had, oh, what was the language?
Base camp.
Yeah, but on base camp, I was going to look through it and find out if we had code of cooperation kind of things, if
yeah.
we had ways. And I looked through all the documents on base camp and it's nothing.
Okay.
So if we are talking about how we interact as a committee, it has not yet been done. I was standing up at the board in this room
Okay.
doing the mission statement, I think, yeah, more so. So that was done. So any next steps and action steps? Do we want to reach out to, so more committee members? We do need that.
Yeah, Pam's gonna get the survey results.
I'll get that stuff to him
Right.
tonight.
So those guys.
Yeah.
It would be great to identify a couple of other potential members. I just don't really have this, I don't know the best way to go about it.
I
don't think we
I
need to-
saw John Hodge as he was leaving and said, hey, I got a committee for you. But unfortunately, he just got put on TDI,
Right.
so. Because he was on he built the high school. He was the chair of the building committee.
Oh,
and
wow.
John and he was a part of St. John's when they built the center
Oh,
over
wow.
there.
Oh, he's
And
great.
he's a community-minded person, but he was on Topsham Housing meeting tonight, so.
Can he
declined.
recommend somebody?
No, he said he'd think about it
Okay.
because he was exactly what I felt, he's a kind of knowledgeable person
Yeah.
and has worked enough.
What about John, the Beavers down the street from you?
Hiltz?
No.
No, Howard.
Oh,
Howard,
Jim Howard?
Jim Howard.
I think
Or
Jim
would they
comes
know
in, I
anybody?
would think that Jim would come in later in the picture.
But that's
Um,
a age bracket that I think is something that we could tap into,
Yeah.
whether or not
It'd
it's
be interesting if we
them.
had a suggestion,
Yeah,
He might.
someone with kids are.
That was your
they're gone.
homework. I don't want to bring up the sort of subject.
I think it was.
I think it was too.
You be the task.
Yeah, you're absolutely
You
right.
be the task manager.
Hey, as long as everybody else is doing the work, I'll keep you on task.
Okay,
Don't remind you of
so
everything.
Rob, you'll contact Jim Howard. And then
That may have been the action
Steve, who
section.
were you gonna contact? Who was the person?
He's
that you
gonna make sure
mentioned?
I contacted him.
Yes,
gonna
that was
contact
my
me.
job.
You're gonna
I'm
make sure Leslie contacts Carmela.
gonna make sure you contact Carmela.
I will, I'm happy to ask her. I think she's a bit shy for that, but I will ask her.
I don't mind if I see her first.
Okay.
Or Kay as well.
Yeah, I think,
She talks to her a lot
yeah.
on
And
walks.
I'm trying to think of countryside estates, folks up in that neighborhood that I should probably talk to Nick and ask him what Vermont of people that live up in there that have gone. That is,
How about the adult golf classes or tennis? Anyone from that?
yeah, I was thinking Andrea Gorgosian, but her kids are your age,
they
really.
are.
She's so
But
busy.
yeah, and she is, but I'll go through the list and kind of take a look at
Think
people
some
who
of the outside of
participated.
town.
Like nobody at Highland would be worth talking to, right? Because they have their own
Well, Kelly
facilities.
has a couple that take classes with her at the Y that she's thought about, that has said to me, well, maybe I should broach it with them, so I can speak to her.
Because I know they do things there, but not a lot
But
for the
Tom
amount
is
they pay.
complaining that they're not using, Tom complains
know,
that they
yeah,
aren't
he
using
was.
it like they could be.
Like
Yeah.
think of, people that come to mind, like Rebecca Singleton, she's sort of our
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
age, like down in that neighborhood, or Karen Bergeron, or, it's the same kind of crew as us.
Doesn't
Yes,
Jim-
yeah,
Jim
it
We
know
is.
need to
people-
reach out a
It
little
is.
bit more.
Doesn't Jim know people for being out in the community, like seeing patients and stuff? Does he know anybody?
Who might be elderly and active, yeah. I can ask at the Highlands, I can ask Chelsea, who's the executive director at the Highlands, see if she knows anybody, or Amy. Okay. I can
And
do
it
the
doesn't
Highlands.
have to be someone who's like active in terms of physically active. It could be other, cultural type
Well,
things.
'cause they
are
can
Yeah,
zoom
of
just
in.
interest.
community, right?
Yeah. And they don't have to
Right.
come if they're
Oh.
not driving.
Oh, yeah, no, I meant in
Everything's
terms of their
sport.
interests. They don't have
Things
to
to
be
do.
super sporty sports. I'm saying
Yes.
they could be wanting to use a community center and
Eat
alternate
dinner,
function person or other types of classes.
breaking things.
What about that, like Amy Farrell, Stephanie Sursich, that kind of neighborhood in there?
Well, they're all our age, but
Right, that's what, anybody else in there, but. Amy Wallace.
I'm gonna start looking for old
You
people. I'm just
are.
gonna walk around town.
She could
You're
zoom.
perfect.
She
She took tennis of me
She's-
years ago.
Mess up her leg somehow. She got knocked over. Comes out.
We could have a bean supper.
Yeah,
She took the tennis years ago with me, maybe Wallace.
I'll
Did
ask
she?
Amy
Yeah.
Wallace. She would be a good.
But
generation.
like, does the town run your programming? Like, do you?
55 plus does a lot of it.
55 plus,
And the Highlands does a lot of it. We used to run when there was a group called the Meters that was in
yeah.
town.
Okay.
That was kind of based out of the Baptist church down in the corner.
Mhm.
And we would run seasonal programming, but they kind of, their membership that was 10 years ago and they're all gone now. And the leadership there kind of fell apart and I don't think they're active anymore. I don't believe I've heard of them in the last 5-6 years.
What about
'Cause we used to
Annie,
do
the-
trips.
The PE teacher, Annie.
Martin,
Martin.
I was thinking Michelle Crawford, I don't know about her husband,
Rick would be great.
I was just thinking that's,
Yeah,
Rick Crawford, they live in town?
they do.
thought
They're
so.
up in Ivanhoe, they're up off of Westwind.
Yeah, yeah,
We like blue hair. Gold. What?
All right, let's,
Recorded.
let
I mean, like.
Remember, we're being recorded.
let me also talk.
I
to
keep looking
my
at the
team
number of
because you might know
participants.
some people from the hospital or
it
whatever,
gets
who
put on
might
the
be a good
website.
connection
Oh.
to.
Delete.
Who knows Rick Crawford and Michelle Crawford?
That one would be a piece of cake, but you guys know them too.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah,
You do?
yeah, I know Rick, yeah,
Does Steve have anybody on his list?
yeah, he just, Rick Crawford, I
Okay.
just volunteered.
You doing Rick Crawford?
you want his cell phone number?
I have it. Yes.
You have Mike's
Text it to
number.
me.
You have Mike's number.
Okay, so there was somebody else that you mentioned it to though. Steve.
That was Dave Dubriel earlier, but
Which isn't a bad idea, I think, of the younger generation and I mean, Dave, Andy Maynard, that group of younger kids coming through that have been here through a lot and have a sense of what it was.
Plus he
and
grew
what
up
it
here.
could be. Yeah, I mean, both of them are
Yeah.
have that qualification.
All right,
Yeah.
that's gonna elicit something. Anything else that we
I
need to
have
talk
3
about?
people on my list.
I have Rick and Dave. No, Rick and Dave. Oh, Carmella?
She's a half.
Okay, 2.5.
She's perfect though.
Anything else that we need to talk about next time?
Well, I mean, I do think like, next time we should also talk about like, the communication piece, like the sort of thing that, just like, I think when we did the comp plan, Larry and Rod were the ones who spoke with the consultants. I mean, how we would
What?
want to be engaged with what they're doing, because they will need a point person. I mean, and I don't know how involved you want to be and.
Rob's our point person.
Yeah, okay, so then we just have to say that, because, in terms of like who's gonna be talking with I'm gonna call them consultants, they said they're not consultants, but
The
talking with them,
professors.
professors. If they had questions, one of us should probably be a point person for them to call, or,
I don't
Not-
know.
not putting it on you.
I was the media point.
Yeah, no, I don't mind
Yeah,
being that.
you just
Yeah.
have to be
You can be
a
media, yeah.
I'll be
You're the
media,
point of
Media.
everything.
you do the co-chair thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's Katrina.
if
Yeah.
he's on TV.
I can be a
then-
I think it's
point on that.
kosher.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, sorry, I agree. You do media.
Yeah.
Have you had to do any media?
Just for this
Yeah.
committee?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
Nothing's
No.
not good. Okay.
I think that Ski George.
I was gonna ask
Ski
that
George,
question.
Yes,
Oh,
we need
yeah.
more of that.
Yeah.
to-
Nobody called you last week?
that kind of attention.
Okay. So communication, Leslie's point person.
Well, if we add
We're the
Jenna,
consultant.
we certainly will
Professors.
need some of those other recommendations, because
Don't take
Yeah.
Rob's
she's
point
like,
person away.
she's
She's
like
in
the
case you'll
same
be
as
here.
you,
Oh, thank
Jenny
you.
and Rob put together.
Yeah.
No offense, Jenna.
Yeah, no, why don't we each try to at least find 2 people to ask? So like, just think about whoever you have on your list and then add one more person to try to think of. We gotta shake the trees here. Gonna find people.
yeah, agreed.
I think if we could think of somebody who does childcare, too. Because then they'd have connection to young families
Homeschool.
or homeschool group. That's a great idea. What do we know? Who would know? Anybody from the school that would know?
Post it on Facebook, get lots of answers.
Oh, the remote, maybe the remote group. Where's that remote school group? I can contact the person, the head person. Yeah, Lisa. Lisa, I can do that. A good guy. Okay.
I will say that was more remote, like participating in school. is
Yeah,
more
but they might
remote.
know people.
Yeah.
I know she's very nice and I'll just see what she knows. Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
that would be good. Just at a minimum, each reach out to 2 individuals to try to kind of elicit.
And if they
By the
don't know somebody,
21st?
ask them if they
Yeah.
might know somebody
By
else.
the, that's exactly. Right, yeah, by the
Are you
21st.
doing notes for the meeting?
Rob was doing those, right?
Whoa.
Yeah, he took great notes.
Yeah.
I watched him.
And it's all been recorded.
That's right, I'm just gonna watch it.
I'm just gonna delete it.
For someone with blue hair.
That might have not been
Put
the
that in the
correct
note.
description.
Yeah.
I just meant somebody older than Rick.
So,
What?
I have some notes too.
I think. Rick
I've
would
got
be-
lots of notes.
I think
if
Rick would
anybody
be great.
needs notes.
No, I
Rick
do
would
as
be
well.
great.
Rob was doing it through the whole thing.
Is he a Mount Iraq guy?
Okay,
Who?
Like he went,
Rick Crawford.
grew up here?
Yeah.
Not
Oh.
on air.
we adjourn the meeting.
Yes,
Yeah.
Meeting is being adjourned.
Turn that thing
I
off.
second that.